Hey, this is Cam, and welcome to my coverage of the Stormlight Handbook. This series is all about showcasing the fantastic arts, things I find interesting as a GM, and any new lore tidbits not present in the novels. So we're picking up where we left off with the Radiant Path, starting with Stonewards and going all the way through Bondsmith. So Bondsmith is not a playable class, but I do like that they included it for all kinds of different info reasons. One thing I just wanted to point out is, before we get started with the fun little tidbits and such, is this section of like a little intro blurb story thing to give you some ideas of what Stonewards are about is really long. But that's fine. I've had mixed feelings on these. I don't know why. I feel like they're just not quite as well written as the rest of the books are. And I almost feel like it's prose. It's like a short, concise story being told. But it's written in like a very specific way, almost like it's written to be like rules. I don't know. It's like it is what it is. They do their purpose, and that is enough. All right. Anyways, on to the task at hand. We're talking about Stonewards. The Order of Stonewards are heavy infantry of the Knights Radiant, standing side by side with their allies as an unflinching vanguard. We've only gotten to see a few Stonewards so far, and haven't really seen any in action. So I'm looking forward to diving into this here. All right, so philosophy. I will be there when I'm needed. Dependability is one of their core tenets, and they strive to never let anyone down. Rick and Steve characters, let's go. Stonewards help strangers in need, and they always make time to support their friends, which sometimes leads to taking on large projects that are more than they can handle. More than any other order, Stonewards refuse to bend their oaths for the sake of convenience, and many develop a habit of self-sacrifice to live up to them. Really echoes Talon's story as a herald, that we know so far, at least, of that self-sacrifice. We know that he would often pick up impossible tasks and often die in the process, but would very often succeed, and so very much emulating Talon for sure. Each oath centers on humbly supporting those in need and helping people achieve their dreams. Heck yeah, that sounds awesome. Second ideal, I will step forward when others fall back. Third ideal, I will be the foundation on which others can build. And the fourth ideal, which is extra kind of specific to individuals. The building of these oaths often causes many Stonewards to deny not only their personal desires, but their essential needs. Though the specific words are individualized for each Stoneward, the fourth ideal recognizes that it's impossible to consistently help others if you don't care for your excuse me, if you don't care for yourself. So words that everyone can live by. The fourth ideal requires you to learn the difference. You must both ask for and allow yourself to receive the care you need, which will allow you to serve others better. It's a fun one there for sure. All right, Stoneward history. During the Desolations, the Stonewards acted as elite ground troops. They were renowned as the Radiant's finest soldiers, though the Windrunners often contested this title. Their dependability earned them the respect and appreciation of all of the other orders, even the Windrunners, their friendly rivals. Just kind of a fun nod there. And one thing I kind of like about that too is, so his name's actually mentioned here, Dami the Stoneward. He's a character mentioned briefly here and there. And so I like how we get Kaladin and the Windrunners getting brought up through the story as main characters. And I think my assumption is that Dami is going to be a main POV character in the closing 5 books. So I'll be really stoked to get that perspective more. Also, Zoo, is Zoo the stump? I can't remember if Zoo is a stump or not, and I would love if someone can confirm that or not for me. Anyways, back to over on this side. So in times of peace between Desolations, Stonewards organized and participated in competitions, especially sporting and fighting tournaments. Participation in these events was open to all, and they generally drew crowds of spectators with betting. Fun stuff. Other Stonewards often did expeditions to explore the less charted regions of Roshar, which is fun too. All right, Peaksbran. So we've seen Peaksbran, and so in Shadesmar, they are. This is an example of things that I find interesting about some of the wording here. So in the physical realm, they don't necessarily have some of the features that they have in Shadesmar, but in Shadesmar they must be a single rock just by that wording. And again, it's a game, so like if you wanted to have almost like a pattern style, like a marble of different tones and such, I'm sure you could do that in the game, but just interesting specificity. But anyways, I jumped around there a little bit. So they look like a single type of rock, but the colors and textures in stone have enormous variety. So some might be as smooth as marble, while others might be rough and porous like basalt. Their clothing isn't part of their essence, like say the honor spread, so they typically import Unkalaki garments to wear. The culture has many parallels to Unkalaki, which is so sweet, and I cannot wait for Rock's novella to come out at some point. Like the Unkalaki, Peakspren tend to be pacifistic, though they remain non-judgmental of their bonded radiance. Peakspren avoid violence unless absolutely necessary, and they place a much higher value on providing and caring for family than they do on martial prowess. Several different tribes live in Shadesmar, and so unlike the monolithic tendencies of some other Spren, depending on your player character / who you're running the game with and where they're at in the game and all that kind of good stuff, the Peakspren could have very different opinions, which is cool. So like for the example that they gave is some like the Mistspren might have a big hate on for humans because of the Recreants, or others might not care. And so you can kind of explore different story arcs with stuff like that, which is neat. And there we have a Stoneward piece of artwork, looking very, very cool. I specifically love that they did include a piece of clothing because that is super relevant to their attention ability. So yeah, really like that. Right, and cohesive teamwork, their kind of special trait. After you use the gain advantage action while having one investiture or more, whether you succeed or fail, the next test an ally makes against the target gains an advantage. Until the end of your next turn, while standing on stone, you can't be moved against your will or knocked prone. So a little bit of help a buddy out, and then also very tanky, you shall not pass kind of ability. Here we have some Peakspren in the cognitive realm. And onwards to Truthwatcher. The Order of Truthwatchers attract those who seek truth wherever it can be found. Artifabrians, scientists, philosophers, journalists, and all manner of scholars and thinkers. I like in the little intro kind of example blurb of what they can do, that they included one with enlightened Mistspren, which is pretty cool. All right, the Cosmere contains countless secrets and mysteries. Truthwatchers live to uncover and solve as many as possible, acting as the researchers and investigative reporters of the Knights Radiant. As an aside, you want to play a character like Calcier? This could be a great way to do it, being a Truthwatcher. Okay, so let's go here. Philosophy, I will seek truth. And I really like that they included this bit here. Many truths are subjective. And Truthwatchers are open to changing their beliefs as they learn new information. I specifically like the truth or subjective bit because I feel like you could have, let's say your player character is a Truthwatcher. Someone else that they know in the setting could also be a Truthwatcher with very different goals and opinions than you. And I think that would be a really fun foil and potentially have really interesting dramatic situations of perhaps you both swear oaths at the same time in opposition to each other for some sort of situation that you're in, and it could be really, really interesting. So, and then also just that knowledge gain piece of which truth between the two of you is actually correct, and do you see and ultimately end up seeing eye to eye with this kind of rival, or do you convince them of your truth? So, yeah, I think something that could be really cool. Second ideal, I will seek truth wherever it is hidden. I like this bit. It kind of like, so a lot of the Knights Radiant are very much like ride or die by our oaths. This is what we're setting out to achieve. We must achieve it. But the second ideal here is success or failure in this pursuit doesn't matter. It only matters that you deliberately seek to learn. So participation ribbon, let's go. But regardless, like learning through failure is really, really valid too. So jokes aside, it makes sense. All right, third ideal, I will reveal truth to all who seek it. This is, I think, a really interesting one in my book. So the third ideal obligates you to share truth with anyone who would benefit from it, which, I mean, like in real world situations, specifically getting into the fourth ideal is really interesting. So we'll cover the fourth ideal and talk about this a bit. So this oath requires you to acknowledge the likely consequences of sharing well-kept secrets and knowledge forbidden by the powerful, and then to share those truths despite the risk, no matter who might try to ignore or silence you, and no matter what price you might pay. So, example that comes to mind here, like maybe your character has learned about the anti-void light, and you've got those spheres that go boom when they're in contact with normal light. And you come upon like fortified settlements where it's mostly just militia, people just trying to do their best, and to help them ward off a coming foe of Voidbringers or whomever it might be, you give them some of these spheres or tell them how to do it, and ultimately they're successful, and then they get roped into basically Breaking Bad style cooking up all these void spheres for some criminal syndicate or something. So just like interesting repercussions from sharing valuable information. Breaking Bad campaign, let's go. Okay, we'll move on though. So Truthwatcher history. So they're the most scholarly and quiet of all the orders, commonly researching the nature and limits of surge binding, fabrials, and other technologies. Some others become investigative reporters, loudly and forcefully voicing their opinions if they discovered that a leader or other powerful person was abusing their power or lying to their people. I think the lying to their people part could be really interesting too, because you could have someone who's objectively a good leader, but is withholding some information to prevent fear mongering or for some sort of. I think fear mongering makes the most sense. But you and by your oaths might be like legally obliged, for lack of better words, to share that information, leading to some different conflict there too, which can be interesting. They're also, I think, one of, if not the only order that doesn't have any central organization. Then they won't read about it here specifically, but they do mention the Watchers of Palia, which is something to do with the Stonewalkers adventure. Okay, and then it just touches on like who we know, so like Renarin and all that. Enlightened Truth Watchers. With your GM's permission, you might be able to bond a Mistbrin who has been enlightened by Shah Anat. As an Enlightened Truth Watcher, you begin having visions of the past and future. When you bond this Mistbrin, you gain the Future Sight key talent, which is really, really neat. We'll touch on that later on. And then it recommends some specific Lightweaving things too. All right, Mistbrin appearance. We've seen Mistbrin in the... Oh, you know what? I don't think we've actually seen Mistbrin in the... Yeah, no, I think we have, so we'll skip on this part. Mistbrin culture. They're known for their highly curious natures and zest for novelty and adventure. They're greatly interested in learning how other people think and looking at things from a new and different perspective. They love adventure. I just specifically find it interesting how they're very curious and love novelty and adventure, and yet they choose to bond the most scholarly and quiet of orders. Generally speaking, the Spren and who they choose to bond seems like it works out really well and is what's the word? I can't think of the word, but like they mesh really well and it makes sense. This is, I think, one of the only ones where it's like that seems kind of opposite of what I would expect given your nature. But yeah, I thought I'd call it out. Bonding preferences. Most Mistbren seem to view the prospect of bonding a Radiant with general indifference. However, enlightened Mistbren all seem to be actively seeking a Nahel bond. So don't know if we knew that specifically. I guess we do know that Shah Anat wants her children, as she views them, to be safe, and likely the most sensible way would be bonding a person to make them radiant and be stronger together. But yeah, I don't know if we knew that specifically, so that's kind of a cool shout out. And then also, specifically, that Shah Anat doesn't experiment on sapient Spren without express consent. Mistbren who welcome new experiences were the first Radiant Spren to accept Shah Anat's offer. So I don't know if we knew that specifically. I really like the character of Shah Anat and want to learn more about them because they're not necessarily good, but they're definitely not totally evil, maybe even just evil in general. And so yeah, I'll be really curious to see that character's development. And if we get to see more sapient enlightened Spren. As a point of completion, I think it's interesting that we only have the player options for this one specific type of enlightened Spren, and my assumption is who knows how many we'll actually see in the books by the end of it. And obviously they're not available now, and that very well could be big old spoilers for the Cosmere on the whole too. So from a completionist standpoint, weird having a single of the 9 playable Radiant Paths have one specific offshoot table and such, but it's freaking sweet that is included, so I'm here for it. Alrighty, let's go onwards. There we are with a Truth Watcher, probably in the Valley of the Night Watcher or something, just looking by the green jungly vibe. Spiritual healing. Before you restore health to yourself or willing ally, you can spend 2 investiture to instead cause the target to recover half as much focus as they would have recovered health. So this feels expensive off the top of my head, but I haven't played the game recently enough to really attest to that, or I don't think there's been a Truth Watcher in the playtest that I did back in the day too. So yeah, this feels expensive, but I'm assuming it's been playtested a whole bunch. In fact, I'm very sure it has. All right, so there we have the misprint. We also have a misprint in the physical realm, which looks really, really cool. Okay, enlightened talents. One quick shout out too. So here is that same misprint in the physical realm, and then they also include the enlightened misprint, which kind of like drips blood upwards, which is super creepy. And so if you do gain a enlightened bond here, you gain this fun new table of abilities. We're not going to read through everything. We're just going to go over like the quick summary. My preferred side is definitely the left. It kind of plays into the divination 5e wizard kind of style that I mentioned before, which when I said that, I don't think I actually explained what it is. So this is kind of what a divination wizard in 5e gets to do. You get to reroll dice basically. But so the first one you get for future sight here is Glimpse the Future. Spend 1 investiture or more to reroll that many dice from your test, which is really powerful. So obviously, if you miss an attack, you can re-roll the attack. Or if you roll a 1 on 1 or both damage dice with your Radiant Shardblade, you could re-roll those, which is really, really cool. But also, like, out of combat, too. Like, let's say you're looking at some mural in an ancient ruin, and, like, there's some big clues in here. And if you roll well, it's going to really help out the situation you're in. And if you don't, you're hooped. You can re-roll and possibly get a better result too. So I like that. Then the higher tier one, which is a reaction, is, well, first of all, so not before the reaction ability, is you pre-roll d20s equal to 1 plus your tier of play that you're in, which I think it tops out at tier 4 or 5. I can't remember. And when an enemy or an ally rolls a d20, you can replace them with this number as a reaction. So, like, obviously in the case of allies, you want high rolls. In the case of enemies, you want low rolls. And it's just a really fun, cool mechanic being able to be like the dice master, for lack of better words. The other side is interesting, though, too, on much more of like a role-playing standpoint. So you get to choose a past event you're familiar with and test lore. DC determined by the time since that event. On success, you have a 10-minute vision of that event, which is really neat. It's kind of like a way to do flashbacks, which can be a really fun tool to build out character backstory and progression and stuff. Vision Void. You and allies within your sprint bond range are immune to enemy effects that reroll your dice, and enemies can't see visions of events you influence, which is cool. This ability has been changed since playtest, because when it was in the playtest mode, it was really specific and niche. Also, what's everyone's thoughts? Niche or niche? I've said niche all my life and recently heard niche. That is correct. And I don't know which one I prefer more. But yeah, so I like that it's been expanded a little bit to being immune to enemy effects that reroll your dice. I don't know how many effects of those there are because I haven't thoroughly gone through the bestiary yet, but I like that that's a little bit more expansive than what it was. Alrighty, Will Shaper. Will Shapers are freedom fighters, teachers, and leaders who all work in their own ways to free the oppressed and create opportunities for others to express themselves. Alright, so this is Venli to a T, basically. Will Shapers embody freedom. This can be the freedom of liberating the captive, but also the freedom of choice and self-expression. They're the builders and craftspeople of the Knights Radiant, laying the foundations of not only buildings, but of civilizations. Cool, cool. All right, so philosophy, I will seek freedom. Second ideal, I will seek freedom from those in bondage, which is exactly what Bentley said. Third ideal, I will fight oppression, which I don't know if we've gotten that ideal yet from her. And then so this is just like some of the other oaths where like there's the basis start of the oath and then up to the individual radiant finish it in a suitable fashion for themselves. So the examples that they gave is I will fight oppression, even if that oppression comes from within, or even if against the tyranny of the leaders I serve. Which is interesting. The third ideal depends on your journey and the challenges you face, especially relating to seeking freedom for yourself and others, despite your flaws, biases, and obstacles. Good stuff. The fourth ideal requires you to instead focus on the people you're helping. Have you made a lasting difference in their lives? Are those people truly free, or did they gain but a glimpse before again succumbing to the clutches of oppression? To stay free, people need the ability to maintain their own freedom. Which is interesting. So like, let's say there's a village that you freed from a harsh mayor or whomever it was, or whatever it might be. And you go back and find them and they've totally regressed and decided, you know what, that self-governance thing just isn't for us. It was too much responsibility and we didn't want it. That would be a really interesting play for your character to go through. Wheel Shaper history. The ancient Wheel Shapers traveled through Roshar to aid settlements, some constructing buildings and infrastructure, while others taught skills and other essential trades that offer everyone more freedom to live as they choose, such as sanitation and metalworking. Many Wheel Shapers chose to aid campaigns to depose tyrants, change oppressive laws, and liberate the enslaved and incarcerated. Specifically that last part, I feel like it could have a really interesting interplay with Skybreakers in your campaign. So be it a kind of like inter-party conflict with a Skybreaker PC, or more likely and easier to do, I'd say, with Skybreakers as an antagonistic force in the campaign too. Yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun. Due to the Order's philosophy of facilitating radical self-expression, these Radiants were far from uniform. Some were flamboyant, gregarious, and loved daring passions, while others were much more subdued. Wheel Shapers all celebrated and encouraged each other's forms of expression, since they believed that freedom to follow their own path was the most important thing. Relevant in today's social media and stuff for sure. During the Desolation, the Wheel Shapers' main responsibility was to reinforce fortification in anticipation of an attack and to rebuild following one. I love how that kind of echoes and mirrors, reflects, I guess, the better term, the Deathbringers being like the sappers and saboteurs. The Wheel Shapers are the ones who shore up defenses, which is cool, and I don't know if we specifically knew. Lightsprend culture, their love of travel and adventure, as well as their seeming taciturnity. While they speak humanoid languages, Lightsprend have a greater alignment to the rhythms of Roshar than other Spren, and they prefer to communicate via rhythmic pulses. Anyone can understand this form of speech with enough exposure, but it's especially intuitive to singers, which we see with Venli and such. And then they specifically call out human bonds, because in the novels, also as an aside, I always try to catch myself between saying the books and specify between the novels or RPG books, because books is too broad. There's so many books in the Cosmere now. So for a human to bond to Lightsprend, the human must demonstrate a commitment to freedom and a rejection of slavery in all its forms. So I like that they include this kind of thing, because while we might not see a human bond a Lightsprend anytime soon in the novels, that shouldn't mean you can't in the game that you're going to play. So I like that. Alrighty, onwards we go. There's a picture of a Wheel Shaper. Good stuff, good stuff. And also the Lightsprend here with their cool bronze visage. Spiritual cohesion. Once per scene, choose one or more allies you can influence up to a number equaling your current ideal. Each target becomes determined until the end of that scene. If a target uses that condition to add an opportunity to a test, increase their cognitive defenses and spiritual defense by 2 until the end of that scene, which is really cool. Basically, like, it soups up the difficulty of enemies trying to beat the test, basically, which is really, really neat. All right, so Windrunners. I'm not going to read too much for Windrunners because I think they're probably the one that we know the most of. But we'll go through some stuff still. So though Windrunners heavily emphasize excellence in weaponry, their capabilities also make them excellent scouts, and their history emphasizes leadership. All right, so philosophy, I will protect. Second ideal, I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. Third ideal, I will protect even those I hate. So Kaladin, our boy. Fourth ideal is unique, about confronting your own fear of inadequacy and such. Okay, Windrunner history. Windrunners were the Radiant scouts and strike teams. They used gravitation to surveil from afar, then ferried teams of Radiants on special missions. The Windrunners also sometimes operated much like conventional soldier squads. It's interesting how like the ancient Radiants do seem to very much be what the current ones are too, minus a couple of small oddities out. And I was thinking on it, and it's quite literally just because, in my opinion at least, because the Radiant Spren know what they're looking for in people, and that just kind of circulates. Let's go on here. So the ancient Windrunners clashed often with the Skybreakers, usually over philosophical differences. So we've read about that before in the Skybreaker part. However, the dislike between the two orders persists to the modern day between Honor Spren and High Spren, the partner Spren of these two orders. So we get a bit of this from Syl off and on here and there, but cool to see it's called out that it's not just specifically Syl's opinion, but a more widespread thing. This, I don't know if this is specifically Syl, but it looks like Syl and it looks sick. All right, so for Honor Spren culture, I don't remember if this was called out specifically in the novel, so they share much in common with the humans of Alethkar, warlike with a tradition of hierarchy, military excellence, and going on grand hunts to track and slay massive beasts. Honor Spren society still values obedience, hierarchy, and order, but Honor Spren pride themselves on being flexible, at least more so than High Spren when they feel a cause is important enough, which is really interesting. It kind of reminds me of, is it book 3 at Lasting Integrity with Shallan and Adolin? because those Honorspren, the leadership there at least, absolutely have a cause that they believe very strongly in, and they do some pretty bad things to uphold what they perceive as right. So it'd be fun playing with that in different contexts too, be it for some just like brevity in a campaign or for a larger arc too. So fun stuff to play with. Here we go. I kind of think this Windrunner art is a little more underwhelming than some of the other ones. And to be fair, like not everything can be as standout as freaking Kaladin swearing his fourth ideal with his shard plate on and his crazy cool Sill Spear, or also the Megatron Skybreaker, which is just the best art ever. I do think that the shield is apt though. It is kind of funny giving a spear to the Skybreaker instead of the Windrunner, but the shield makes sense too. Alrighty, so we'll go down. So reverse lashing is their unique trait, which we're very familiar with the books. Basically what Kaladin does all the time of making things fall in different directions. Once again, some awesome colorized arts from the novels here too, of what Honorspren look like in Shadesmar. And here we are, last but not least, the Bondsmiths. So it breaks tradition here, or breaks the format of instead of having 3 little stories, it's just one. We are aware of 2 Bondsmiths in the modern day, so they could do 2, or they could try to do 1 per Bondsmith spren. But I think it makes sense just to do 1, because it basically is a longer one, but it summarizes what we've seen Dalinar do, basically. Because he's kind of being our POV into what a Bondsmith is, which is so good for Bondsmiths, because Dalinar is kind of bumbling his way, learning through things and realizing how much he needs to change his viewpoint to be able to learn all this stuff. So it's a great way for us as readers to learn along with him. All right, so Bondsmiths are the heart, soul, and commanders of the Knights Radiant. They use the surges of tension and adhesion, which generally alter the rigidity of objects and bind them together. However, Bondsmiths wield these to a much greater degree and with different properties. Notably, they can alter and forge spiritual connections. This power can be as innocuous as connecting with someone to speak an unshared language, but at higher ideals, it can drain Stormlight from a foe's body or forcibly alter the bond between a Radiant and their spren, which is stuff that we've seen Ishar do. Bondsmiths can also mold the spiritual realm to create visions into which they can bring others, so more Dalinar stuff. Alright, each Bondsmith is partnered with one of the great ones of the spren, the Stormfather, the Sibling, and the Night Watcher. These spren have unique abilities, which they can grant their Bondsmith. So using the example of Dalinar riding the storm, and then Navani being able to like have minute detailed control over all of the systems in the tower. The bonded spren also determine the type of invested light the Bondsmith uses to power their abilities and can grant to others. The Stormlight for the Stormfather, Tower Light for the Sibling, and Lifelight for the Night Watcher. So who do we know that uses Lifelight? Just Lift. And Lift is being to see the Night Watcher / I think also saw Cultivation. So definitely seen some fun theories online that like Lift is going to be the next Bondsmith. And just interesting call it that, of course, Lifelight for the Night Watcher. So we'll see what happens there in future books. Pancakes for all, let's go. Okay, onwards. Despite their extraordinary powers, Bondsmiths aren't nearly as suited for combat as the other orders. They can't summon a Radiant Blade or Shard Plate, and their powers are much better suited to uniting others than dividing them. Alright, so the ideals basically just covers what we've seen of Dalinar. So I will unite, foster unity, and bring people together. Sometimes this can manifest as seeking an end to a war or facilitating eras of peace, or gathering a coalition of disparate factions for a common goal. The 3 Bondsmiths spren each are so different in nature and personality that the individual words of their ideals can present entirely different. So I'll be really curious what Navani's goals look like, or I'm sure we'll get those in future books. Second ideal, I will unite instead of divide. I will bring people together. Third ideal, I will take responsibility for what I've done. If I must fall, I will rise each time a better person. You cannot have my pain. Indeed. The fourth ideal requires recognition that all life is precious. A Bondsmith can't allow themselves to make their enemy faceless. They must consider the cost of every move they make to minimize the loss and ruination of life, which is cool. It's a really cool theme in the novels of the Voidbringers weren't actually the singers all along. And it's like that interplay of like, the enemy has been severely wronged too. Just because of the enemy doesn't mean that they're evil. Maybe a little bit less so with Teravangian / Odium, but for the people in general, it's a really fun play. Okay, bondsmith history. So the term bondsmith predates even the ancient Radiants. It originally referred to a person who could manipulate bonds in connection. Such a bondsmith discovered and facilitated, I don't know why I couldn't say that word, but we're just going to move on, the first friend bonds, eventually resulting in the founding of the Knights Radiant. So I'm curious if this is in reference to Ashen, before there was like limitations put on the surges. That's kind of my thought on it too, specifically because then Honor comes in, seeking to place reasonable restrictions on surge binding. He believed it necessary to have the powerful bondsmiths as a Radiant order, but he ensured that they were limited in number. Honor granted only 3 unusually powerful spren. Yeah, so we've done that already. Good stuff. Despite the bondsmiths being limited to 3 full Radiants, they could take squires, who they typically chose from the elite warrior unit assigned to protect them. These squires wielded the Order's 2 surges, but without their bondsmiths' unique abilities. They also had attendants and guards, many of whom took Radiant oaths to demonstrate loyalty, though they had no expectation of gaining powers of their own. Some ancient Radiants viewed these oaths as the purest form of radiance, and such loyal attendants were considered members of the Order of Bondsmith despite their lack of Radiant powers. Very interesting. And lastly, playing with bondsmiths. Only 3 bondsmiths existed at a given time, and wielding their extraordinary power as a player character would unbalance gameplay. Wild concept, doing a campaign with just 3 players as bondsmiths. That would be bonkers, and it would be OP as heck, but it would be probably the equivalent of like 20th level play as a D&D party. It'd be fun though. It'd be very fun. That being said, bondsmiths can be patrons, which then can make the party squires, giving them surges to adhesion and tension, which is again an example of being able to, in the previous video on the first 5 Radiants, there's ways it touches on being able to get spren of different types and getting access to different surges that way. This would be a way to do that too, without the struggle of trying to balance multiple Radiant oaths and such. And that is where we shall leave off today, with this lovely piece of art that we'll pick up next time of Yasna/Jasna. Yeah, very cool. Well, thanks for tuning in. That was a really cool read through of some fun stuff. And we'll pick up next time talking about some of the surges and going on to other stuff too. I'm not going to go super in detail going into all of them because there's a lot and it's crunchy mechanical stuff. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you then. Bye!